Welcome to Hard Talk. I'm Zainab Bedawi. It's nearly a year since a new pope was installed, but still the same problems dog the Catholic Church. A UN committee on the rights of the child has just criticised the Vatican over its failure to deal decisively with child sexual abuse by priests. Gay rights activists still attack the Church on its stand on homosexuality, and the Vatican's finances have been under scrutiny and criminal investigation. Last year, Cardinal Peter Turkson from Ghana was tipped to become the first black pope, and at 65, he is young enough still to achieve that in the future. He's calling for financial reforms and action against poverty and inequality. But does the Catholic Church have the moral authority to take a lead on such issues? Cardinal Peter Turkson, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you.
Why do you say that the financial crisis was partly the result of moral failings?
Because ultimately behind all financial transactions, and when people have to deal with financial instruments, it all takes a certain amount of moral decision. It involves decision making, and every decision making is like an expression of morality. And that's why we can extend an ethical consideration to everything that happened with the financial crisis.
You are advocating reform in the international financial system by creating a kind of global public authority and a global bank that would consider in particular the interests of the developing countries. You feel that would be a good way to go forward?
Essentially the poor. And the poor may well be found in developing countries, but they can also be found even within the developed countries. But it's basically to have the financial systems that we have think about the marginalized, think about those who get missed out in all of these operations. So essentially it's something that we tend now to refer to as an inclusive system of economics, an inclusive system of financing, so that everybody kind of gets considered in this.
That's very much the tone, isn't it, now, that's been set by Pope Francis. He is a very modest man, likes to use public transport, won't live in great splendour in the papal residence, but in the guest house, that kind of thing. I mean, and he, at the end of last year, in an exhortation, said, not to share one's wealth with the poor is to steal from them and take away their livelihood. It is not our own goods which we hold, but theirs. It sounds like Marxist doctrine, common ownership of common goods.
Not quite, because, the Church's social doctrine, which provides a guidance, for all of these operations and systems, basically are based on a couple of principles, four essentially. Apart from, the affirmation of the dignity of every human person, which needs to be, respected, there is a thing about the common good, of people, and that just means that we should be concerned about the well-being and the flourishing of all of us.
Benny Lynch, Professor of Economics in the University of Buenos Aires in Argentina, of course the Pope is from Argentina, says, is this an invitation to confiscate the Vatican's riches, or is the Pope referring only to the riches of those who are outside the walls of the Vatican?
Fine, and if you have
the Vatican is rich, isn't it?
No, but again, that's the point again. What does it mean the Vatican is rich? Are you talking about the work of art displayed in the Vatican Museum? Or are you talking about the wealth of individual dioceses spread around the world? What does the wealth of the Vatican refer to?
Well, you made, for instance, in the Vatican, I think it was something like nearly 90 million euros profit in 2012, for instance.
Based
That's
on?
a lot of money. Well, on the contributions that you get from people and
okay,
wealthy
so that's
Catholics
it.
and that kind of
this
thing.
is if you make wealth based on contributions.
The grandeur of the Catholic Church, as you said, those paintings and the fact that, I mean, the Pope is effectively a head of state. So, I mean, when somebody like that professor makes that point, it kind of slightly jars, doesn't it?
No, because probably what the professor is overlooking is the fact that the Vatican, as a head of the Catholic Church, supports over 500,000 local churches around the world. Churches not like, the Church of London or the Church of New York, churches which where even the pastors and the priests who serve the church need to be supported before they can,
It is generally accepted, of course, that a lot of the aid distributed around the world is through the offices of Catholic agencies.
Even the setup of churches themselves,
You're not exactly a byword for fiscal prudence, are you, at the Vatican?
Sure, yeah. What is it?
You've had your problems there. I mean, when Moneyval, which is the body of the Council of Europe, which monitors money laundering, terrorist funding, that kind of thing, it gave the Vatican a mixed report. Welcomed its efforts to clean up its institutions, but it expressed surprise that Vatican regulators had not carried out more inspections of the Vatican Bank. There is a former Vatican Bank official under investigation in Italy, possibly because some Italian businessmen may have used the Vatican Bank as a kind of tax haven or a fiscal paradise.
Definitely, this is something. Now, this is something that we just need to recognize. The Vatican Bank, referred to as a bank, some would rather refer to it as a financial institution of some sort. But its presence in Italy and the fact that it did whatever it did probably was also tempting for so very many people who wanted to escape, the normal taxations of, other banks, and so made use of personnel within the bank. It doesn't
look good, does it? I mean, even Pope Francis himself says, I don't know how the scandal at the Vatican Bank is going to end.
No, it can end. It can end. And it can end by, for example, if the Vatican Bank has a mixed staff from different parts of the world, and if his staff is not predominantly Italian or some local group, if you have a mix of staff, who dispose of expertise to do that, I think that can be dealt with.
But you accept that there is a problem, and that when you go about and talk about...
I mean, certainly this is the first thing for anybody.
Crisis, there's been a problem that people sort of look over your shoulder and they think,
Definitely. I mean, definitely there's no denying the fact that an institution this old, haven't had structures this old, they've gathered moss, in its passage through history. I mean, it's just fair enough to recognize that. And just as we have, in the history of the church, we are very familiar with abuses and individuals rising up and challenging the church to, to clean up certain things. Whether you take it in the form of saints who come and ask the church for reforms and all of that. So we know about this. We know that, the church every now and then...
it needs to be cleaned up. You accept it needs to be cleaned up.
There's no human institution which is without sin or failures,
Just looking at you personally, would it be fair to say that you are liberal on social and economic justice, as you've been outlining, but fairly orthodox on social matters like homosexuality, for instance?
Again, we're using vocabularies which have attained meanings in different... liberal. In what sense would you consider me liberal?
You just asked for an equitable distribution of wealth and that kind of thing. But just looking at social matters...
That would not be liberal. That would just be being responsive to the social concerns of the church.
All right. What about being responsive to the concerns of people who have the kind of sexuality that the church doesn't particularly condone? And I'm thinking in particular here of homosexuals. Yeah. When Uganda, for instance, was recently discussing its anti-gay bill, you said last year the intensity of the reaction about gay matters is probably commensurate with tradition. What do you mean by that?
I mean, in several traditional societies in Africa, the thing about same-sex relations was something which were not reckoned with. And in fact, several places they were considered taboos and things that were not tolerated in society. That's just what it means. And this is still there. I mean, it's not only Uganda.
No, I know.
Nigeria also just legislated against this. So this is a reflection of this traditional, sense that I was talking about.
You say, let's understand that. So the tormenting, the persecuting, imprisoning, even killing of gay people in some countries in Africa and elsewhere, which is going on. You say, let us understand that because it may be embedded in cultural tradition.
Again, it's shifting again.
No, but I'm just asking
when somebody comes asking for why a group of people act in a special way, it would be fair to have people understand the anthropologies and everything underlying that. That's, having people understand that, it's not the same as saying that, therefore, it's justifiable or whatever, whatever is being done now.
How can you try to understand the persecution of gay people in some countries in Africa? What is there to understand? That's surely wrong.
Sure, there is. I mean, if a group of people, a society, places such a high premium on childbirth as a source of, increase of its local population, And basically because in those, a local society that suffers so much, child, mortality, infant mortality and all of that. For a community like that, increasing its membership is very crucial.
Sure, but I mean,
when therefore any lifestyle comes, but let's.
But
let's
there
just
are other
understand.
Cardinal. I mean, female genital mutilation prevalent in Africa, deeply embedded in cultural traditions in
Definitely,
Africa.
but
Are you going to say,
that,
let us understand that?
No.
Are you?
See, people go to
but
universities.
Are you going to say, let us understand FGM? What gives rise to it?
What is necessary to understand? I mean, there's no way anybody can meaningfully understand any feature of the world these days without having a certain amount of historical understanding. That historical understanding leads you to consider the situation now, and then only then can you then say, in the light of what we know, in the light of present development, are we still going to go on doing things this way? That's where you make the decision.
But it sounds like you're trying to explain and to some extent excuse such practices
explanation
which are embedded in tradition.
Explanation is not the same as justification. There is a difference in that. Okay. I mean, when, for example, we're talking about this, let's introduce the factor of the slave trade. It's also something that happened. At that point, at that time in history, people found reason to do that. And when we're talking about, we need to understand that
we condemn it. We condemn it.
You condemn it only from this time.
You're not condemning. For example, you've also said Africa's hostility to homosexuality will protect it from sex abuse, the kind of child sexual abuse we've seen in the Catholic Church in the West. But, I mean, again, you've been criticised for saying that, Cardinal, because you're conflating two things. Homosexuality is quite different from child sexual abuse.
It is not conflated. It's people moving between lines of argument and thinking, which sometimes brings this up. I mean, all of this started when a gentleman came to me asking about this, and I said, this is the situation. The rights of these people need to be safeguarded and respected. But if, the questions about why then do we have certain African communities or society, we do this is a traditional viewpoint. And saying that this is a traditional viewpoint does not mean that, therefore, let us hang on to the traditional viewpoint. I mean, it's useful for an outsider to understand why people can have that.
But you must regret conflating the two. Let me tell you, Kieran Conry, who's an English Catholic bishop of Arundel and Brighton, said homosexuality is irrelevant to the child abuse problem. We have been very careful to keep the two issues well apart.
Definitely.
You accept that?
I accept that.
You do?
Yeah.
All right. Talking about child sexual abuse, of course, we've just had the publication, the report by the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, which has been interrogating Vatican officials about child sexual abuse, which, of course, has been a huge scandal overshadowing the Catholic Church. Just take one example of what the report says. It says it wants the Vatican to open its files on the kind of child sexual abuse that has gone on. Why won't the Vatican do that?
Why would the Vatican what?
Why won't it open its files and reveal its files, be more transparent about the child sexual abuse cases that have gone on over decades?
If the Vatican, we may not readily conclude that the Vatican keeps files about church and sex abuse around the world. The Vatican has duly recognized the need, for help for all the victims. The Vatican readily and consented to sign on to this convention, which brought it to Geneva for this question and all of that. The Vatican has shown all interest to cooperate with, with whatever international organizations are set up, with view to helping victims of sex abuse. Now, if there are files on any of these, they are to be found in dioceses. That's where these perpetrators or these victims are to be found. They are in dioceses, and if you're looking for files on any of these, you go to a local diocese.
But the Vatican can say to its diocese, look, we want to see the files. Because one question, that people want an answer for is, does the Church report abuses by priests or potential abuses to the secular law enforcement authorities in the countries?
Definitely, that's what the Vatican is now saying.
But that's not what the report says. The report says that sometimes we've seen evidence of a parish priest committing child sexual abuse and then just being moved on to another parish somewhere else, even to another country.
I think when we get to talking about a certain amount of understanding needs to be, the Vatican right now, with the understanding that it has of this problem, has agreed to cooperate with any world body set up for this. It has advised bishops, okay, to recognize that the civil authorities of the wherever the priests live are completely responsible and in charge of this. And any perpetrator or anybody who abuses a child or anybody has to face the laws of the state or wherever he is that this are done.
Arguments are not convincing, because this report has just been issued and it says that the Church has implemented policies that have led to the continuation of the abuse and the impunity of the perpetrators.
What are the policies? What are the policies? I mean, the
like
Church
the
has implemented
of priests.
Yes,
that's for example.
Now, for example, again, this is the thing that I go back to, refer to certain history, and you say, it's not quite, but this is the case. You would, the reporters, those who made the report, and probably you yourself would understand that. Certainly, with the passage of time, our understanding of this phenomenon has increased and changed. There was a time that when bishops got cases of, a priest or whatever being abusive of a child, they thought that it could be dealt with by taking the person to an institution, to a treatment center. Okay, based on the understanding of this issue at that time, they thought that the issue could be dealt with and taken care of by sending a priest or whoever is found to be
That's how they did it.
Treatment.
So
That's
what do you do now? Do you remove the priests from their posts in the church?
No, now that
you remove them?
No, now that the understanding about this situation is improved, and it's round recognized that a simple passage in a treatment center doesn't quite deal with the issue. Sure. The understanding of bishops about this issue has changed.
So what do you do?
The bishops do not simply transfer priests.
Do you remove the priests from their posts in the church, which is what the committee recommends
They will not be appointed to parishes.
But will they be removed from their posts in the church?
Removing the post means that they be, be laicized.
Yes,
that's what
will they be removed from their posts?
Then when that happens, a bishop always has a due process to go through. And going through that due process, if at the end of that the decision and the feeling is that the priest should be laicized, he will be laicized. But at the same time, I think, in all fairness, the bishop also would want to try to help the priest himself.
Do you think, categorically now, all the criticisms you've had from victim supports group, somebody like Barbara Dorries, director of Survivors Network of those abused by priests, told the BBC, we must insist on tangible action that helps vulnerable children protect their bodies, not old, vague pledges that help a widely discredited institution protect its reputation, is what she said. Can I ask you, Cardinal, categorically,
yes,
is the Church ready at last, once and for all, to take steps to ensure that never again will a child be abused by a member of the Catholic clergy, and if they are, will you take decisive action?
The answer is yes, and the Vatican has demonstrated this clearly now. It was not obliged to sign on to this convention. It accepted to do it. It was not obliged to, subject it to, it's accepted. So the Vatican has made it abundantly clear that, they said the protection of children, whatever, is of its, whatever. It set up a commission in the Vatican, headed by the Cardinal of Archbishop of Boston, Sean O'Malley, a commission to follow up on this and ensure that this is taken care of, in a due, with regard to all the setup and the due legal structures that exist in countries.
Will you have members of civil society and victim support group on this panel that's looking into child abuse?
Sure, there are experts, and the experts on that.
So, but do you accept also that critics have said this whole issue of sexuality, the Church's stand on homosexuality, the child sexual abuse situation has overshadowed the good work that the Catholic Church does all over the world? Do you accept that?
It has, and probably, now, again, this is a very snaggy
Has it
thing.
overshadowed?
With due respect for the victims of the abuse, who need to be helped in all senses, in all cases, answering that they think it's overshadowed all the good, that certainly has been the case. That's certainly been the case that, the good work that's, of the church have been overshadowed, infinitesimally by this church. That's true. That's true. But I mean, saying that is still not it's because the church attaches so great importance to the well-being of the victims and would wish to do everything to help them. Okay, but definitely its good works do not need to be, it's not, it's like the proverb you have. You don't throw out the dirty linen and the, the dirty water, all out at the same time. So,
Cardinal, talking about good work and moving on to a different issue, the kind of good work that the church should be engaged in, interfaith dialogue is a very important aspect of the work of senior Vatican officials such as yourself. You haven't exactly contributed very much to this, have you? In fact, arguably, you've operated to the detriment of good interfaith dialogue between Muslims and Christians.
No, it's not true. It's not true. When I was in Ghana before I came to the Vatican, I was the president of the World Conference of Religions for Peace. My vice president was the Ahmadiyya, the head of the Ahmadiyya movement, Wahab Adams, who may well even be in London at this time on the conference. And then subsequently, I was the head of the president of a peace council, whose vice president was a Muslim.
But can I explain why I put that point to you? Because, of course, in 2012 at the Bishops' Conference, you showed a YouTube video called Muslim Demographics. And it was very, very alarmist. For example, this video said, by 2050, France is going to be an Islamic republic. And there are those of you who said that your numbers were wrong.
Let me explain.
But you were criticised for trying to
Certainly, because, one, that video clip was sent to me by another bishop. The title of the video clip in the mail did not say Muslim demographics. The title of the video clip that was sent to me was Demographic Problems. Okay? So it was as such that I was using that to demonstrate demographic problems in Europe. And demographic problem in Europe in a sense.
You're being alarmist. You were saying there are going to be more Muslims than Christians and Catholics in the future.
This is what I'm trying to say. For me, it was a demonstration of the low fertility rate, the low birth rate, and the low type of thing. And their concern was really that if a population...
The contraceptive culture of Western Europe compared to Muslims breeding in greater numbers. That's alarmist.
That wasn't the point. The point was that when the local population drops beyond a certain level, it will mean that any newcomer into that society will not be well received. So it was actually to ensure that the birth rate in Europe does not lead to a certain amount of xenophobic, But
if people question the expert advice, how can you at the Bishops' Conference just show this kind of YouTube? You're a senior cardinal, you're president of the Council of Justice and Peace in the Vatican. You should have access to better advice than that.
It certainly is the case. Certainly is the case. Just that I trusted another bishop who sent me that. And he sent me that, as I've tried to say. It was not on that Islam.
You should have checked it.
I should have checked that source. But trusting another bishop sent me something without the title.
Next time you'll check it. Briefly and finally,
it just probably means that every mail that comes from anybody...
You're going to have to be careful in the future.
Yeah, sure. But it just means that... But how can you go out with this without trusting people?
Briefly and finally, Cardinal, do you think these kind of controversies we've been discussing involving you have dented your chances of ever becoming the first Black Pope?
This has never been, my vision or desire or anything, with wanting to become anything in the church, but to just be of service to God's people. So, for me, it's not a question of a chance for this and a chance for that, or a chance for that. That's not of a concern to me.
Cardinal Peter Turkson, thank you very much indeed for coming on Hard Talk.